Hi, my name is Sam, and I'm here to talk about American freaking fascism. So, after going through certain traumatic events in the last couple of years, it's got me thinking, and post Trump election era, it's got me thinking a lot about a lot of things. One of the biggest things I've been thinking about, uh, part of it due to pressure, some peer pressure I've been facing, is when it comes to times like these of socio-political upheaval or uncertainty or potential civil unrest or civil war, some people suggest that it's better not to stand out because on whichever side of the war effort that you'll end up on, you want to be a part of the group. You want it to be more we centered. Other people suggest that standing out or becoming a celebrity or someone high profile may be the very thing that saves your life because it could be a pass that it could be a pass from having to join the war effort or let's say something terrible happens and you get captured by the enemy lines. Well, maybe they'll spare your life if you perform well, or they'll let you go simply for the fact that you're high profile. So the main question really lies in, do you want to spare your life and leave everyone else behind, or do you want to die as a man of honor? Well, here's the other difficult thing. Sometimes, if you're high profile and the enemy lines really like you, well, they may end up using it for their really fricked up efforts, which may go against your ideals and principles. Even if it spares your life and spares you from war and guarantees you somewhat of a life of luxury, though I'm sure it's pretty Marilyn Monroe-esque in its nature, which actually was not that luxurious if you really read up on her history. The main thing I really want to say today is, if you're like me, a brown person in this country, or anyone of immigrant descent, or a Jew, or someone who's part of the LGBTQ community, if you're left-leaning or liberal, please go back and read up on your World War II history and also avoid any spaces or figures of authority that are telling you that you're easily molded or telling you to be more productive when you're already running dry or trying to put you in some type of sorting hat or isolate you because you're neurodivergent or a person of color or have mental illness. Just avoid such people and spaces because, excuse me, let me adjust my glasses. Once they have found you, well, there's no telling what they'll do in the next decade or so. Now, if you're like me and you've already made some foolish mistakes, welp, you can still take some action now to be careful about not speaking to those people anymore, and also about sticking in solidarity with people who do care about you in your life. Okay, if this isn't creepy enough, let me get started on the very first part of my series called A Time Capsule for My Country. Many of the ideas and sentiments I state here, people may either agree with, disagree with, or they may agree with but say, well, what can we do now about any of this anyway, at this point of our nation's state of being? To which I answer, Do what I do. Be a little bit more useless. Write more, read more, watch less family friendly television, though it's fine for relaxation, just don't binge. Do more art, play more games, and cook more with your loved ones who don't annoy the living crap out of you. Garden, plant a tree, walk in parks or national forests, and create more safe spaces. Spend less time on the internet. Spend less time chasing after and valuing fame, status, and money. Do your own little experiments, come up with theories, etc., but in a manner that won't get you into trouble or have the IRB or some government agent showing up at your door. Be a good neighbor, be a more compassionate colleague, feed the homeless and helpless. Be a safe space where needed. Stand up to a bully without getting yourself killed or deported. Other than that, there isn't much we can do at this point. However, for those of us left surviving our nation's turmoil in what seems like will be a rocky next couple of decades, if not more, whoever's hands this document happens to fall into will be a better force of change, along with a hopefully larger collective force that has a similar mission and vision, so they may, from the ashes of their dying nation, create something new and better. Part 1. People have a lot of complaints about my generation, Gen Z. We're a little too spaced out, too ADHD, quite jaded and skeptical, a bit too irresponsible and rebellious, not performing the best at fitting into standards of education in the corporate world or workplace. But I challenge all of us to look at the bigger picture. Are we not living in times of great socio political changes and upheaval, as well as ever increasing financial inequality? I'll propose something for us to think about today. When a country is destined to go through some sort of significant revolution, each succeeding generation will feel the weight of the burden of our outdated and corrupted systems more and more. They'll feel the emotional pressure, financial pressure, mental pressure, all will be transferred down to the latest generations, unless they were born into super wealth and super health. They'll feel more and more the lack of humanity being acknowledged within them, because any society destined for upheaval or ruin is going to become increasingly dehumanizing and militaristic in its own ways, as well as take away from or increasingly pathologize individual expression. They'll feel more triggered about various forms of oppression and injustice than some of the generations before them. But this doesn't mean that they're suffering from mental illness, they're behaving badly, or that they're sensitive snowflakes. Perhaps there are unknown evolutionary or other external forces that play a role in how each generation behaves and thinks that is really all part of a grand plan to make sure that we don't remain stagnant. We just have to recognize its function in the grander scheme of things, which includes not just our survival, but also our progress and evolution as fully conscious and intelligent beings. At some point, something has got to give. At some point, somebody will snap. And when a significant number of organized people snap and manage not to get institutionalized for it, it's called revolution. Much of the generations above mine are trying super hard to keep the status quo right now. Then there are the various oppressed classes, even amongst the impoverished, who are becoming increasingly divided based on the level of bigotry they hold towards particular groups. One side wants to blame particular groups of people for the downfall of society, while the other wants to imagine a society that could get a step closer to equality for all of humanity. They do hold a similarity, however. Both question the status quo to a significant extent. Think of it this way: the status quo, our current institutions and governing structures, are like the human body. The bigots and charlatans can be compared to non commensal bacteria, viruses, or foreign bodies that are invading and corrupting our systems, as well as causing the body to degenerate for their own gain. The humanists and revolutionaries on the other side are simply an inflammatory response to all of this. So even though we can seem troublesome at times, it is important to understand where we're coming from. Though we mean well and try to act in a way to preserve the body and protect it from these predators, sometimes our inflammatory response ends up causing more damage. So I see why so many figures of authority would want to keep people like me in line. The status quo can be thought of as a body suffering from chronic illness, slowly being worn out by its outdated systems and corrupted by various bugs while going through intermittent inflammatory responses caused by people like me, who are tired of seeing those trying to improve and update the systems for the better being squashed by some ever increasingly resistant bugs or certain worn out and absent minded authority who simply won't budge even after various treatments have been tried. There will come a day, however, when acute illness strikes, and the two extremes, The bugs and the inflammatory response/immune system will throw the body into a type of septic shock. I don't believe there's anything to fear because death is a part of revolution. Oh, and so is love. The growing flames of xenophobia and where they're coming from. There are plenty of people in this world who live with a lot of pain due to their life circumstances that doesn't go acknowledged, but it is a pain that doesn't come with an official diagnosis. Sometimes I wonder if our society requires too much of an explanation for every mistake, every error, every fall, and doesn't just see it as a natural part of life. This is especially true in a society that is becoming increasingly standardized. So there are a lot of people that either truly believe that when they fail, there is something deeply flawed about them, or they try to seek a type of diagnosis because the environment they're in requires a type of explanation and places overly high expectations on them, with rules that keep them running on a hamster wheel that leads to nowhere. Perhaps this is one of the many pitfalls of a nation that has fully embraced late stage capitalism and fading democracy to an almost self harming extent. I mean, let's admit it, we're basically sold out. Times like this result in another rise of bigotry against foreigners and those of foreign descent. We can criticize late stage capitalism and the heinous use of foreign cheap labor without getting involved with some hypocritical bigots who claim to want to protect America by labeling immigrants as job stealing thieves, while simultaneously engaging in imperialist behavior that is only damaging our economy and enabling foreign slavery. Those of us associated with foreigners like me can also introspect on our own desire to gain approval from and blindly feed this capitalist machine. Observe how much we draw our worth from the concept of productivity, which further promotes the capitalist machine to leech off of us, and how our own background and culture play into this way of living. The origins of bigotry don't come from nowhere. We all have our own biases towards each other. For example, there is a common bias among immigrants and even those of immigrant descent, from personal experience, to look at American culture as promoting laziness and decadence, while certain groups of Americans look at outsiders as industrial and opportunistic thieves, or else expect them to work harder than everyone else and take on extra weight for the simple fact that they are foreigners, promoting the continuation of internalized colonialism for the benefit of the powerful and privileged. In both ways, we end up alienating each other, though generally people like me, an immigrant descendant, are coming more from the side of self defense, as we do not live in a world where our comebacks can be equated to the bullying and discrimination done by those who hold a certain amount of privilege, protection, and political backing that we usually don't have due to not only factors such as status but also race. Basically, everyone in America is hypocritical to a certain extent, and it's not even our fault because it's virtually impossible to avoid. Besides, if the only clothing you're able to afford is made by young slaves from China, India, or Bangladesh, unfortunately, you don't have much of a choice but to feed into that dynamic. Even though I'm relatively pro people, I also know that there is a lot of caution we must heed to before supporting certain so called populist movements, which only reinforce the dynamic of destroying our planet, of everyday humans feeding billionaires, of a few men who own the world neglecting familial and social responsibility completely while placing that extra burden and weight on others, and preaching righteously to their constituents about family values, and simultaneously feeding the flames of ever growing bigotry. While I argue for a world that allows humans to be defined past their productivity and allow more grace for them to make mistakes, for the right to own and express their individuality and authenticity, as well as for the impoverished, sick, and the disabled to have extra supports and leeway so they can have some form of safety net without the remainder of society looking down at them or judging them so much, I would also like this world to encourage and empower the people to want to take on certain responsibilities by their own volition and almost rehabilitate and sweetly coax them back into it, rather than pushing them into a corner and shaming them for not being the best team player. It should also be more fair and equal with who it allows that leeway for. For example, people included in the immigrant group are often expected to be the most tolerant, strongest, and most productive. Also goes for a lot of minorities and a lot of other minorities in our country. Even when we're going through our own difficulties or facing systemic injustices, we oftentimes promote this dynamic amongst ourselves and are quite militaristic in our own ways, neglecting both our mental and physical health because many of us were trained to be almost self sacrificing to social responsibility and productivity. It's no wonder that we are so easily taken advantage of in more individualistic and self serving cultures like those present in the US or in certain social circles that see this hardworking and self sacrificial quality in us. The worst part is, should anything bad happen to us, we are less likely to receive empathy and compassion, not only from those with strong roots in America, but even from our own ethnic groups due to the expectation they put on us to be almost inhumanely productive and industrious. It's very easy for certain authority and power in this country to take full advantage of that and double down on punishing or disciplining us, rather than helping and uplifting us more gently when we legitimately need a hand and some understanding. It's no secret that even in the healthcare system, a lot of injustices and neglect like this still occur, and they also occur in the workplace. There are both subtle and overt types of cruelty that have existed for a while towards Asian Americans and other industrious and educated immigrants, especially if we're not white, to be blatant about it. Even though I have critiques of my own ethnic community, I also am aware of the type of envy we get from other Americans due to the industriousness we're associated with, and how that makes certain groups in this country feel threatened about their livelihoods and position on the hierarchical ladder, though some of those very same people have no issue taking advantage of us and making their bang for their buck before squashing us, oppressing us, and taking much of the credit. It's also so easy for media to pit us against other minorities who have been suffering the systemic injustices here since the dawn of colonial era America, even if we're trying to help them up because we look like we're better off than them in many cases, when in reality, even though we do still hold some advantages over them, many of us have simultaneously become masters of sprinting through stormy waters. Much like the suffering and disappearing middle class in this country, many immigrant Americans find themselves trapped in the chaos of this country's socio-political upheaval and sometimes cornered and scapegoated by basically everyone with very little security or support. This in turn leads to a lot of in-group conflict during times when we should be sticking together to protect ourselves against the growing cancer of bigotry, division, and distrust in this nation. Well, I hope I didn't talk too quickly, but I will say this much. Find solidarity with people who, even if they don't think exactly like you, are still pretty like-minded, are humane enough to offer you a safe space and help you out during difficult times. And it doesn't matter what race or gender or whatever they are. In fact, build as much solidarity with not only people who are like you, but also people different from you. Because this could potentially be the difference between, large scale civil unrest or war, or us being able to handle all of this BS peacefully in our country in the next decade or so. And I still have hope for us, so yeah, stay safe, guys.